The history of the 1st Division, the Big Red One, begins as far back as the Revolutionary War, when its Battery D of the 5th Field Artillery served under Captain Alexander Hamilton. This battery has the longest record of continuous service of any unit in the United States Army. Its history runs parallel to the history of America. The Fighting First was organized as a division in World War I, when it scored the first American victory of the war at Cantigny. In the great battles of Soissons, Saint-Michel, and the Meuse-Argonne, it helped smash the German army and end the war. During World War II, the 1st Division, true to its name, was in the first waves of the invasions of North Africa, Sicily, and Normandy. It smashed across France and Belgium in bloody fighting, was the first to enter Germany, and helped stop the Nazis in the Battle of the Bulge, in the drive to the final victory in Europe. 20 years later, when communist aggression in South Vietnam threatened the peace of Southeast Asia, the first full U.S. Army division sent to meet the challenge was the Big Red One. The Vietnam engagement was to be the longest and in some ways the most arduous of the wars fought by the 1st Division. But as always, the division lived up to its great heritage of valor and success in battle. The arrival of the first Big Red One troops in Vietnam in July 1965 was very quiet and efficient. They were moved swiftly off the beach at Cam Ranh Bay and sent to various base camps in the Saigon area. The first task was housekeeping and setting up defense perimeters. Then patrols, not only to clear the area around the base camps, but also to harden the men to the difficult climate and terrain. In all the varied combat history of the 1st Division, it had never fought in the soggy, humid climate of the tropics, or in the tall grass or thickets of the jungle, or in its rivers and swamps. The foot soldiers were inducted into airmobile patrols. There was contact with the enemy, so that they learned something about his guerrilla tactics. But there was no big action until November. By that time, over 14,000 1st Division men were in Vietnam. Their area of operations was to be a vast portion of central South Vietnam, from the Cambodian border to the South China Sea. Division headquarters was set up 20 miles north of Saigon at Ye An, under Major General Jonathan O. Seaman, first of the 5 commanding generals the Big Red One was to have in Vietnam. The first of the dozens of major battles the division would fight in Vietnam took place at the tiny village of Ap Bao Bang, north of Lai Khe on Highway 13. On a sweep along Highway 13, several units of the 1st were hit by a reinforced Viet Cong regiment. 3 enemy frontal assaults were thrown back by intense small arms fire plus automatic weapons. The 4th and heaviest Viet Cong assault was stopped by 105s, firing at close range. As the weakened enemy fell back, the Air Force was called in to pound their escape routes. In its first engagement in jungle warfare, the men of the Big Red One fought like veterans. There were casualties, but the Viet Cong left 198 dead on the battlefield. It was more than just a victory for the tired infantrymen. It was proof they could defeat a hard-fighting enemy on his own terrain. A few days later, on November 20th, another road convoy turned the tables on a would-be Viet Cong ambush near Trung Loi. The convoy immediately set up a defense perimeter and returned fire. When a gunship drove the enemy from cover, heavy ground fire, especially by the mortar platoon, smashed the trap. The victory at Trung Loi was followed early in December by the biggest and most successful battle of the year. This was Ap Nham Ma, northwest of 3rd Brigade headquarters at Lai Khe. A task force was searching the countryside, eliminating Viet Cong bases, blowing up bunkers and underground factories. When they ran head-on into a fortified base camp defended by 4 battalions of the enemy. A violent firefight broke out immediately. A radio call for fire support brought in deadly concentrations of howitzer fire and repeated tactical airstrikes. After 2 hours of fierce fighting, an infantry assault finally routed the enemy. The Big Red One had its losses, but medevac ambulance helicopters saved many lives by flying in to remove the wounded even as the fighting went on. Patrols grew larger and longer as the division increased its pressure on the elusive enemy. Even so, there was time for mercy missions to the South Vietnamese. Civic action, medical supplies, skilled help, and friendliness to villagers and their children. The beginning of 1966 saw an upsurge of activity by the battle-hardened 1st Division, with armor playing an increasing role in campaigns like Operation Crimp and Rolling Stone, and fierce engagements like those at Tan Binh and Lo Cai, where 1st Division soldiers proved at devastating cost to the enemy that they were masters of the jungle ambush. It was at Lo Cai that the division won its first Medal of Honor in Vietnam in the person of 1st Lieutenant Robert J. Hibbs, whose 15-man patrol chopped up 2 Viet Cong companies. Lieutenant Hibbs was killed when he attacked an enemy machine gun to cover the rescue of one of his wounded soldiers. Under a new commanding general, Major General William E. Depew, who took command in March, the Big Red One lashed out at the enemy in ground drives and air assaults by helicopter. The campaigns were continuous as task forces struck hard throughout the spring, summer, and fall of 1966 in the humid jungle, on dusty roads, in the vast swampy delta of the Rung Sat Special Zone below Saigon. Battle followed battle as sudden, swift probes took the Viet Cong by surprise. Search and clear teams swept through his sanctuaries and hiding places. Armored road marches baited the enemy into would-be ambush traps, then turned the tables with devastating effect. Vast quantities of supplies and weapons were captured as dozens of VC base camps were overrun. The toll of enemy dead and wounded rose. Operation Attleboro alone accounted for over 1,000 North Vietnamese and VC killed. Communist plans for taking the offensive were completely disrupted. By the end of 1966, the men of the Big Red One were experts in the revolutionary new tactics of air-mobile operations, which rushed troops to the battlefield with unprecedented speed and mobility. Division cannoneers set new records for the speed, volume, and accuracy of supporting fires. Coordination with aerial support, either by gunships firing rockets or jet fighter bombers, became a highly polished art. Of great benefit were the lessons learned in how to fight the guerrilla and ambush tactics of the enemy. The Battle of the Minh Tan Road was a striking example. After very careful planning, a powerful armored column from the 1st Brigade was sent on a road reconnaissance in order to lure the 272nd Regiment of the crack Viet Cong 9th Division into battle. As expected, the Viet Cong tried to ambush the column. 3 battalions attacked abreast along the entire 1,200-meter length of the convoy. The heavily armed column, ready and waiting, blazed back with everything it had, and it had plenty. While the army held its blocking positions on the road, helicopter-borne infantry was flown in to attack the Viet Cong flanks. Tremendous artillery fire poured in on the numerically superior enemy. Forward air control personnel called in strike after strike, 96 sorties in all. This sustained rain of fire was too much for the Viet Cong. They broke and ran with heavy losses. The Battle of the Minh Tan Road was a superb example of the combined use of armor and infantry to destroy an enemy ambush. Armor serving as a fixing force to hold the enemy in battle, while infantry battalions maneuvered to hit his rear and flanks. The continuous campaigning of 1966 had familiarized the 1st Division with most of its vast area of operations, kept its lines of communication open, and disrupted enemy efforts to take the initiative. Now, the division was to strike directly into Viet Cong sanctuaries. The target was the Iron Triangle. the vast jungle area which was the enemy's foremost operational base for attacks on Saigon. In January 1967, Operation Cedar Falls was launched. 5 infantry battalions, plus 2 more from the 173rd Airborne Brigade, were airlifted to blocking positions to encircle the objective. Armor closed in to seal off escape routes. The main attack force struck deep inside the enemy-held jungle, so thick in places the Hueys couldn't land, and the men had to descend by a rope ladder. They pushed through heavy jungle, thickets and vines, waded through streams, searching for the enemy in village hideouts and underground bunkers. There was resistance as the Viet Cong sought to hold up the advance, but they invariably got the worst of it. 30 artillery batteries laid in devastating fires. Engineer bulldozers moved in to level broad stretches of jungle to deny the VC a future hiding place. One of the most significant results of Cedar Falls was the large number of Viet Cong, 576, who surrendered under the Chu Hoi, or Open Arms Program, which encouraged enemy soldiers to join the government side. With the Iron Triangle made untenable for a while, the Big Red One turned its attention to another Viet Cong stronghold, War Zone C. It was suspected that insurgent headquarters was located north of the city of Tay Ninh. Led by a new commanding general, Major General John H. Hay, who assumed command early in February, the division undertook painstaking preparations for Operation Junction City. Junction City was larger than Cedar Falls and lasted much longer, from February through April. Units from all 3 brigades participated. They were reinforced by troops from other U.S. divisions and separate brigades, plus Rangers from ARVN, the Army of the Republic of South Vietnam. Altogether, 30,000 Allied troops went in to clear out War Zone C. Despite this large force, there were many engagements in which units of the 1st Division were outnumbered. Aggressive patrols lured the enemy into attacking. When contact was established, help was called in. Additional troops rushed in by air, moving with stunning speed to reinforce the embattled defenders. Supporting fires from the ground and from the air blasted the attackers. Helicopters again proved their versatility in many ways, as air artillery, as troop carriers deploying large forces at distances and speeds that constantly took the enemy by surprise, as aerial ambulances rushing the wounded from battlefield to hospital, sometimes in minutes, as supply ships delivering vital cargo right into the hands of soldiers on the battlefield, artillery and ammo, so that the Viet Cong, no matter how far away, was never safe from the destructive fire of the big guns. The result of Operation Junction City was the heaviest loss yet sustained by the enemy. Over 1,800 dead, and the veteran 9th Viet Cong Division completely shattered. The Big Red One, hardly pausing, pressed on with more campaigns through the rest of the spring and summer. In Operations Manhattan and Billings, task forces probed into enemy strongholds in the Michelin Trapezoid area and War Zone D. Meanwhile, a different kind of campaign, continuous since its inception in 1966, was operating throughout the entire 1st Division area. This was the Revolutionary Development Program, carried out jointly by Americans and Vietnamese to win the confidence and goodwill of the Vietnamese people, especially in villages suspected of harboring Viet Cong. The procedure was for a task force to move in unexpectedly and seal off the village. Soldiers swiftly established security by checking for mines and booby traps. Psychological warfare specialists with signs and posters explained their mission. The village was thoroughly searched for evidence of Viet Cong activity and suspects taken into custody. Then supplies were brought in, and the villagers were fed and clothed. MedCap, medical missions, were a vital part of the pacification program, bringing badly needed treatment for a variety of ailments. While the Big Red One carried out its missions of peace and war, it also conducted an immense training program. Many of its veteran soldiers and battle leaders had gone home through the Army's yearly rotation program. Yet, thanks chiefly to mobile training teams of combat experienced personnel, the 20,000 men of the division were at a peak of professionalism when the 1st began Operation Shenandoah II, one of its fiercest campaigns, and to many veterans, the most outstanding in the division's 5 years in Vietnam. Shenandoah II was a series of violent battles at far-flung points on both sides of Highway 13, from Lai Khe north to the area around Loc Ninh, near the Cambodian border. From September into November, the fighting raged through jungles, across rubber plantations, through wooded areas, tall grass, and streams. It was often toe-to-toe slugging with the enemy. Night fighting was common, as North Vietnamese and Viet Cong troops attempted futile assaults on the American NDP's night defensive positions. The Big Red One had the advantage of highly mobile armored support and heavy firepower always on call, and fought alongside the South Vietnamese Army units. The result was inevitable, a smashing series of victories that destroyed numerous enemy bases and fortifications and left over 1,000 of his troops dead. The rest retreated to their sanctuaries again, leaving Highway 13 secure. Of the 8 major battles that made the Shenandoah campaign so memorable, one of the most remarkable was the battle for the airstrip at the town of Loc Ninh. ARVN and Special Forces soldiers came in by air assault to drive out the Viet Cong, who held a small sector of the town. They routed the enemy from bunkers and houses in fierce attacks. The insurgents counterattacked time and again, but were thrown back each time. The fighting raged for days as both sides brought in more forces. The high point, however, was at the airstrip, where 1st Division Artillery had set up a fire base. The Viet Cong attacked across the airstrip in 3 waves, but were stopped by howitzers, firing at point-blank range. There were many heroes in Operation Shenandoah II. It was a fitting tribute that it was the President of the United States who presented the awards for valor in battle. It was a well-earned respite for the Big Red One when Bob Hope and his USO troop arrived to entertain the division at Christmas. The Viet Cong Tet Offensive that opened 1968 did not take the Big Red One by surprise, since some kind of all-out enemy drive was expected. When the attack struck Saigon and the U.S. Embassy was assaulted, troops were rushed to the city. There was hard fighting. South Vietnamese soldiers did their share. There were casualties and destruction, but the inevitable result was annihilation of the insurgent force. In March, the division resumed its strong offensive tempo under a new leader, Major General Keith L. Ware, famous as a Congressional Medal of Honor winner in World War II. General Ware launched 2 massive campaigns in areas to the north of Saigon and northwest in the Iron Triangle. The first was Operation Wit Can, translated as Resolve to Win. The second was Operation Ton Ton, which meant certain victory. The objective of these aggressive campaigns was to smash the enemy's war potential on a vast scale, kill his troops, destroy his base camps and supply dumps, interdict his supply trails and his routes for infiltration, and retreat. The result was a stunning success. Vast quantities of arms and materiel were found in weapons caches or were seized from the enemy, who lost over 2,000 killed. General Ware also initiated Operation Giant Swamp, in which a new tactical concept was applied to the Rome plow, a standard tractor with a special cutting edge for jungle clearing. Hitherto, the Rome plow had been used with great effectiveness to clear large jungle areas used as enemy sanctuaries. In Giant Swath, land-clearing teams used the plow to slice a network of wide trails through 11,000 acres of jungle. Instead of trying to clear the whole vast area, they divided it into many small subdivisions. The Viet Cong camps, hidden in the jungle, were now highly vulnerable to reconnaissance in force operations and to air assault. Another notable move made by General Ware was to step up night ambush patrols so that almost every unit in the division was engaged. This tactic had a devastating effect on the enemy, who had always considered themselves masters of infiltration and attack under cover of darkness. On September 13th, however, the division suffered a heavy blow. General Ware was flying over Loc Ninh, observing a successful counterattack against insurgent efforts to overrun the town for the fourth time. The general's command helicopter was shot down by ground fire. All aboard were killed. He was the fourth American general to be killed in Vietnam. The assistant division commander, Major General Orwin C. Talbot, immediately assumed command of the 1st, and the drive continued. There was frequent contact with the enemy as strong forces pushed north, carrying out Phase 2 of Operation Certain Victory. Viet Cong resistance was strong, and there was hard fighting as 1st Divisioners conducted several spoiling actions, destroying enemy camps and heavily built bunkers with intense fires supported by artillery. Among the highlights of the drive were several engagements with troops of the 1st North Vietnamese Army Division. These took place immediately across the border from Cambodia's Fishhook area. The Big Red One had established several fire support patrol bases in the area. They were placed astride a main infiltration route used by the North Vietnamese invaders. NVA troops hurled themselves fiercely at the fire bases in repeated night attacks and met devastating fires. They were brave, but the results were always the same. Failure. Many dead. A sidelight of all Big Red One campaigns was the continuing effort to help the South Vietnamese in nation building, working with these ARVN allies in the Revolutionary Development Program. Each village was first made secure by searching it thoroughly for traces of Viet Cong. Leaflets were used extensively to encourage defections to the government side. Civic action programs were put into operation to help the villagers, feeding them, attending to their medical and dental needs. Animals as well as humans were carefully ministered to with the hope that the South Vietnamese could help themselves to attain economic self-sufficiency and to strengthen grassroots government. In 1969, the division continued its tremendous sweeps to keep the enemy off balance. Sometimes it struck from the skies in air-mobile assaults, sometimes on the ground in a fluid shift of tactics. Armor played a powerful supporting role in these drives to cripple the communist winter-spring offensive. Powerful reconnaissance in force operations struck again and again into the Iron Triangle, the Michelin Trapezoid, War Zone C, and War Zone D. Battles by night alternated with fighting by day as Viet Cong and North Vietnamese soldiers resisted desperately. Highly trained scout dogs sniffed out the enemy while spotter planes sought him from the air. Enemy dead littered the battlefields. Captured weapons, like this communist-made AK-47 rifle, were plentiful. It wasn't easy. The terrain was often rugged, and so was the fighting. There were casualties, but medevac was always there to take out the wounded. Sometimes the enemy attacked recklessly, and sometimes he holed up. Then he had to be blown out, or foot soldiers had to go in after them. These volunteers were known as tunnel rats, and no fighting men were more admired for their courage and nerve. Sometimes enemy contact was light, and there was more monotony than action. It was a welcome relief between patrols and sweeps to see the pretty face of a USO entertainer, even if she did bring along a boyfriend. For some Big Red One soldiers, there was a complete change of pace. They became amphibious. In June of '69, the division began to use small fiberglass boats to patrol the river approaches to Saigon. Working in conjunction with Navy patrol craft and shore-based infantry patrols, these ski boats drastically cut down Viet Cong infiltration by water. Elsewhere, the great fighting machine of the 1st Division continued its relentless pursuit of the enemy under its 5th and last commanding general in Vietnam. He was Major General A.E. Malloy. Deploying its vast power with professional precision, going into battle with the high morale traditional with the Big Red One. Its fighting men struck smashing blows against Viet Cong forces concentrating north of Saigon for an autumn offensive. For the defeated enemy, it was one more bitter lesson in the futility of challenging the 1st Division's enormous battle power and its irresistible will to win. The war in Vietnam was winding down for the Big Red One. Early in 1970, it made its last sweep. Orders had come in to stand down, to prepare for redeployment. Men and vehicles were withdrawn from the field. Much of its equipment and facilities were turned over to ARVN forces. The U.S. Army's program of Vietnamization, under which the South Vietnamese Army increasingly shouldered the burden of combat operations, was proving a success. Large contingents of American troops had already gone home. Now, it was the turn of the Big Red One. Early in April, the division left the last of its bases and returned to Fort Riley, Kansas, almost 5 years after it had gone to Vietnam. April 15th, 1970 was another milestone in the long, proud history of the 1st Division. In a colorful, heart-stirring ceremony, watched by many thousands, families, relatives, friends, and dignitaries, including the Secretary of Defense, Melvin R. Laird, the 1st Infantry Division was renamed the 1st Infantry Division, mechanized. It had a new commanding general, Major General Robert R. Linville, and it had new troops. Its ranks were filled with the men from another famous fighting outfit, the 24th Infantry Division, which was deactivated. Under its new designation of mechanized, the 1st Division was augmented with additional armor, reflecting the vast increase in firepower and mobility of the modern U.S. Army Infantry Division. The 1st had a new mission, too, to support our commitment to NATO in defense of the free world. New faces, new strength, a new mission, but all of it steeped in a time-honored, hallowed tradition of service to country. And now, after almost 2 centuries of valorous battle deeds, the 1st Division looks ahead, confident that it will carry out its future tasks in the spirit of its motto: no mission too difficult, no sacrifice too great, duty first.
Among those responsible for
one of the more pleasant duties of the Army's Chief of Staff occurs each year in the Pentagon. It is to express the Army's recognition of one special soldier from among a special breed of soldiers, as he presents the Stephen Ailes Award, named in honor of the former Secretary of the Army who initiated the Drill Sergeant program in 1964, to the man chosen as the Army's Outstanding Drill Sergeant of the Year.
Yet as rewarding as any in the Army.
On behalf of the Drill Sergeant of the United States Army, which I believe I represent here today, Mr. Ailes, thank you very much. We do appreciate what you have done for the program and in helping us become what we are today. What is a drill sergeant? To many soldiers, he is many different things. To officers and non-commissioned officers, he is a professional to be respected and even envied for his ability. To junior officers and non-commissioned officers, he is a man to whom they may turn for help and advice. To the first sergeant, he's a product of a way of life and a subordinate which can be depended upon. To the trainee, he is a drill sergeant, the head, the man to be reckoned with, the boss. He's the instiller of discipline, the rock of courage, the guiding light, the man who never gets shaken. You can see this on me today, here. He's the father, the mother, the big brother, the chaplain, and many times a lot more. In training, he's the man who...
To receive this award is a special honor. It says, in effect, this man is the best, from among the best. Because the drill sergeant of today's Army is not only a professional soldier, but the world's best maker of soldiers. A man of patience, skill, knowledge, dedication, and maturity. A man who is firm but fair. A man who demands a 100% effort from trainees, but who respects the individual's dignity and looks after their welfare. In today's big picture, we'll take a look at the man behind the title. See what he is and what he does. What it is that makes him the drill sergeant.
Settle down. Good morning, men. I'm Drill Sergeant Martin.
First time I saw him, he scared the hell out of me. Of course, you know, I wasn't used to this kind of environment.
I'll be your drill sergeant for the next 8 weeks or until you finish your basic combat training. It's my job as your drill sergeant to see that you get the most out of these weeks. And it's your job, starting now, to absorb the instruction that you receive. You think about it. You'll see it makes sense. When it comes to the Army, I know what it's about, and you don't. So listen and learn. Just a few hours ago, you were a civilian. A couple of hours from now, you'll be in Army uniform, but you'll still be more civilian than soldier. 8 weeks from now, you'll be well trained in the basic skills that every soldier has to have. You'll be ready to go on into advanced training to qualify you in a military specialist. And you'll be in shape. I'll see to that. From now on, what you're going to be is busy.
The drill sergeant oversees the fitting and issuing of clothing, as well as numerous aptitude tests which the new trainee must take to determine what job he is best suited for in the Army.
All right, men, move ahead and form 3 ranks with your duffel bag. Let's go, quickly, quickly.
Well, he talks was rough and everything, but I think we get a lot out of it. Because, you know, that's what they're here for, to teach us, because they've been through the same thing before.
All right, men, when I dismiss you from this formation, I want you to move in the billets on a double. I'll be in to show you how to set up your areas.
The drill sergeant. The guy with the hat. and the boots you can see your face in. Men with the leadership qualities and the professional know-how to teach civilians how to be soldiers. These are special men. Ask any trainee. Ask any commander in a training brigade. Special men. Where does the Army get them? Where do they come from? They come from schools like this. There's at least one in each Army area throughout the United States. When a drill sergeant candidate checks in at such a school, whether he's been assigned or has volunteered, he's already an outstanding soldier. Otherwise, he wouldn't be here. He has to be physically in shape to do the job. He has to have that quality known as military bearing, emotional stability, a clean service record. In other words, he has to have the makings of a leader. If he has, the school can build on his experience to qualify him as a drill sergeant. The course is not easy. Some don't make it. Ahead of each new drill sergeant candidate are 6 weeks of intensive work in the classroom and out of doors, 5 days a week, plus the hours he'll spend in private study or in supervised study periods. Married drill sergeant candidates, if their family is with them, may not have to live in the school dormitory area, though in some cases, if the student's progress seems to demand it, it might be required. In any case, he's going to have plenty to do.
What about this concept of leadership? What's the first thing that you think about when you think of a real leader? Candidate Fairburn.
A man who knows what he's doing.
All right, good. A man that knows what he's doing. But what else does a leader need to go along with that? All right, Candidate Long.
He not only has to know what he's doing, he has to look like he knows and act like he knows.
All right. You've touched on 2 important elements: professional competence, bearing or attitude.
The lesson plan is essential if you're going to get the most out of a period of instruction. Why is that? Because you only have so much time available to make your point. Therefore, it's essential that you take advantage of every second. In presenting a period of instruction to the basic trainee, your time is always limited. You have to plan what you're going to teach and follow that plan step by step. You'll have plenty of practice in preparing lesson plans and presenting periods of instruction from your lesson plans while you're here at the school. As a matter of fact, your next assignment is to prepare a lesson plan and to present
a wide range of problems. Some personal, some social, maybe a problem with morale in your platoon, even religious problems. You'll run into problems with discipline and administration. None of these problems are new. They've all come up before. We're going to talk about some of the typical ones today. For example, suppose a trainee came to you and told you
in training, there's nothing that does so much, so fast, to give a group of men the feeling of being a unit, or team. As drill sergeants, drill instruction is something.
And inspections are an important tool. They tell you how the trainees are progressing as individuals and as a unit. You'll receive instruction and practical work on the correct way to form a unit for inspection. You'll learn how to report. You'll practice escorting inspecting officers for in-ranks inspections. And do the inspecting yourself of the trainee's uniform and rifle in formation. Also of his individual clothing and equipment in the barracks. You'll also learn how to use inspections to teach.
6 weeks of instruction, 240 hours of classwork, testing, practical demonstration, all of it demanding. Among those taking the drill sergeant course are men of the Army Reserve. They wear no special identification. In fact, most instructors don't know which candidates are reservists and which are regulars. They take the same course, meet the same high standards, and succeed or fail on their individual merits. Returning to reserve units across the country, they are important men. Should a nationwide mobilization ever be called for, the Army Reserve will have a large role to play in training the massive army that would have to be quickly created. And competent drill sergeants will play a key role in that training. By graduation time, the 70 to 80% of the class which has made it through is composed of men whose already strong leadership potential has been honed and polished to a high level of professional competence. Traditionally, the honor graduate of each class of drill sergeants is recognized. In this school, this special recognition takes the form of a parade saber, engraved with his name and the date of his graduation from drill sergeant school. As of now, they are drill sergeants. Like every graduation, this is an ending and a beginning. They'll go from here to training companies or back to their reserve units and begin to practice their distinctive trade. Thousands of others have gone before them, and more will follow because the need for them is great. It's an ending and a beginning.
This afternoon you will learn disassembly and assembly of the M16 rifle. Now the first step in disassembly of the weapon is to clear it. You do this by pulling your charging helmet all the way to
All the intense training of the drill sergeant school is aimed right here, at the point of contact between the professional soldier instructor and the soldiers-to-be that are in his charge. And the drill sergeant is there for one purpose: to prepare his trainees to function as soldiers, to give them the know-how that will make them effective soldiers.
Once you get it out, separate the two, place your action spring in the appropriate place, and then your buffer assembly. All right, good. Now we're going to take it in reverse order, step by step, and reassemble the weapon. Now you're going to do this many times. You've got to really learn how to take care of this weapon, even if it means in the darkness or sitting in a foxhole in the mud. You take care of the weapon, it'll take care of you. All right, the first step in assembly of the weapon is to pick up your action spring, open rank, hard. First rank, steady.
The drill sergeant school conducts considerable instruction with practical exercises on the subject of inspections. Small wonder if the graduates of the school do the job with efficiency and style.
Fourth rank, steady. Right up, come on. Second, third, and fourth rank, parade, third. Inspection tells you several things. One is the state of training that the man is in. I myself normally go by the way he wears his uniform. All his buttons are always buttoned. His uniform is neat, his gig line is straight, boots are shined. You never have to instruct him on shaving. He's neatly groomed at all times. It's what I've been told a long time ago. You've got to have that fine, thin line between you and the trainee. I'm a firm believer that you've got to keep your distance if you're going to get in respect from him. I want to call you to attention. I want all 40 sets of heels to come together at the same time, and I want you to sound off with the word SNAP, S-N-A-P.
As you might expect, a drill sergeant is right at home when it comes to teaching a platoon the fine points of the teamwork that is drill.
Parade, fast.
He stands up, he gives commands, he's rough. You know he's rough because he's been in battle before, many battles before.
Indicator right. Hey. 1, 2. Indicator left. Hey. 1, 2. Right.
I classify them as professional. They have a job to do, and they do the best they can. They're just professionals, that's all.
The drill sergeant gains the ability to spot potential leaders in his platoon within the first few days of basic. He knows what to look for.
Pride in himself, right away. If the man is wearing his uniform properly, and he's responding to all commands or orders, then this tells you right away that you've got a good soldier in the making.
As they move through the days together, the drill sergeant continues to mold the unity and teamwork of his platoon and sees the signs that he is succeeding.
Where you've got a group of 50 men out there working together, and you've got something big coming up the next day, a PT test for an example, and you tell them, okay, we're going out there tomorrow and we're going to come out high on the PT test. And they go into the PT test, and you can see them going through the different events. The mile run is a good example. 50 of them will start running at the same time. One might fall out. Yet the rest won't let him quit. They can't touch him, or he's disqualified. But they help him. When you see this, you know this is a good group that's working together. Come in.
First, finance, I would like to talk to you, that's all right.
Have a seat. What's your problem, Ben?
Counseling trainees is another of the drill sergeant's duties. In the course of experience, he hears a lot of problems. He learns to sort out the real from the fictitious, and he knows the options open to the trainee in getting a real problem solved.
The way they say is, if you got a problem, go to your drill sergeant and explain it to him. And I feel if you go to him and talk like a man, man-to-man talk, don't sound like a little boy, or like you afraid of it. You can get it solved.
She's sick and couldn't have a baby and all that, and I have the condo in the house now.
Many drill sergeants are young in years, but there is a maturity that comes through.
We sat down one night and tried to guess the ages of the drill sergeants, and I overshot them by at least 5 to 10 years each one.
As long as you're on active duty. I think after we've gone through all these steps, I think this should just about solve your problem.
Thanks, Sarge. I sure do appreciate that.
I want you to get back out to training, set your mind at ease, and concentrate on nothing but training. We'll work it out.
Thanks again, Sarge.
No sweat.
If you go to them with your problem, they'll try and help you.
Are we ready on the right? The right is ready, ready left. The left is ready, the fire line is ready, fires. Watch your lane. They're up, they're up, they're up. Yes, Albert, keep it up in the air and downrange.
The drill sergeant knows better than most that each step in the trainee's progress from civilian to soldier is built upon the steps that have gone before. Each step is important, and he watches over the progress of his people day by day with a concentration that never varies. The training being supervised by today's drill sergeants is the refinement of generations and is geared to the time and the type of combat the soldier of today is likely to encounter.
Assume a good guard position. First thing you want to do is flex both knees slightly. Put most of your weight on that trail leg. Bring your left hand up in front of your throat region. Fingers extended and joined. Elbow down against your side. Take your lead hand, your right hand, bring it up. Break the elbow at a 45-degree angle. You should be looking over your fingertips. Fingers extended and joined. Now to demonstrate a vulnerable blow to the head region. With the lead hand suited straight forward. Palm down, fingers extended and joined, striking your opponent in the nose region. Very quickly withdraw the hand in the same position. At combat speed, the movement will look as follows. Demonstrator on the dummy. demonstrate a vulnerable blow to the head region. Hold. On the dummy, demonstrate a vulnerable blow to the head region. Hold. Relax. Demonstrate a home guard. On the dummy, demonstrate a side kick. Hold. Side kick. Hold. Relax. Demonstrate a home guard. On the dummy, demonstrate a pivot kick. Hold. Relax. On the dummy, demonstrate a counter to a rear body hold, arms free. Hold. Counter to a rear body hold, arms free. Hold. Counter to a rear body hold, arms free. Hold.
Step by step and day by day, that's how it happens. Soldiers are made, not born.
Hold. Side kick. Hold. Side kick. Hold. Relax.
The drill sergeant supervises his trainees in the closest thing to real live action. Close combat, it's called. When the trainees finish this, they think of themselves as battle-hardened veterans. For the drill sergeant, it's never an 8-hour day.
Okay, man, there's a few things I'd like to go over with you pertaining to this last exercise. On the whole, it wasn't too bad, but you team leaders have to remember. Once you tell that rifleman to get up and move forward, he moves forward. On the double, get down into a covered position and take up a
like our drill sergeant, he's been taking us out the ranges. He's been, you know, taking care of us everywhere we go.
Eight weeks is really a very short time for a group of citizens to become soldiers. It's a major transition, but it happens all the time. Every week, there's another training cycle ending. Another 2 months of intensive effort and learning and accomplishment coming to a close.
I think a drill sergeant really is pretty important as far as he shapes your whole attitude toward basic. If you have a drill sergeant who tries to help you in his understanding, treats you like a man, calls you out for your mistakes, but if you do well, he rewards you, you're going to get a fairly good outlook, and that'll help you a lot in basic. You've got to have a good outlook to get through basic, I think.
You got you on the right frame of mind the first day we got here.
This is the kind of man that I know everyone dream of being, but it's got to be built up on the inside to be this kind of man.
I'm going to sum it up like this. I just like working with human beings. When I see them pass in front of that reviewing stand, if they're all in step and looking good, then I figure my mission has been accomplished.
the cycle ends, and the men that were his platoon move on. You wonder, does he ever run into any of them again?
All the time. I was even walking down the street in Vietnam one day, and this Jeep passed. And this first lieutenant screamed out, "Hello, Sergeant Martin." And I stopped and I couldn't even recognize him. But he knew me, went on to become an officer.
Another cycle finished. Another platoon of men shaped up. But as any drill sergeant can tell you, there are always more where they came from.
Yeah. That'd be great.
All right, you men, get settled down. Stop the milling around.
First time I saw him, he scared the hell out of me.
Good morning, men. I'm Drill Sergeant Martin. I'll be your drill sergeant for the next 8 weeks or until you finish your basic combat training. It's my job to see that you get the most out of these...
The decade of the 1960s wrote itself into history with names of pride and shame, words for all time and words of passing fancy. The decade created a new vocabulary of the magnificent and the minuscule. Expo, miniskirts, Koufax, Kennedy, Gagarin, Pope John, John Glenn, Graham, the Beatles, Peace Corps, Clay, Bleiberg, Pope Paul, The Wall, Kosygin, Johnson, Warhol, Streisand, Dope, Black Power, Goldwater, Hippie, Dion, Woodstock, The Pill, James Bond, Tiny Tim, King, Hare, Brandt, Bobby, Wallace, Golda Meir, Ecology, The Supremes, Apollo, DeBakey, Pompidou, Psychedelic, Dubček, Wyeth, Joe Namath, Malcolm X, Armstrong, Nixon, Indira Gandhi, Demonstrations, Lem. But no name, no single word repeated itself as often on the pages of the 1960s, and with so much controversy, as the name Vietnam. It was a strange mixture of peace and war, a battlefield nowhere and a battlefield everywhere. Life during the day, death at night. An ally at one moment, an enemy the next. A lush jungle mixed with the rust of barbed wire. It was all of this. Those who wanted to find the war might have had to hunt for it. Those who didn't want to find the war often became the hunted. And around the world, and particularly the United States of America, there was another battle, a battle of words, of politics and debate. The question was, who was the hunter in Vietnam and who was the hunted? Who would define aggressor and defender? And there was the larger search for a definition of the word peace. Did peace mean only the absence of war, or the absence of war and fear and oppression? This film is a story of the 1960s in two parts, the story of both conflicts, of war and debate. In the 1960s, many Americans did not believe the United States should help South Vietnam, and dissent and demonstrations became, to some, a way of life. But in the beginning of the 1960s, the threat and the prophecy were clear.
I think we faced an extremely serious and intensified struggle with the communists, whom we've talked about and read stories of 7,000 to 15,000 guerrillas operating in Vietnam, killing 2,000 civil officers a year, 2,000 police officers a year, 4,000. Now, there's been an election in Vietnam in which 75% of the people or 80% endorsed the government. And yet we read how Vietnam is in danger because of guerrilla operations carried on by this small, well-disciplined, well-supplied across the border group of guerrillas. How we fight that kind of a problem, which is going to be with us all through this decade, seems to me to be one of the great problems now before the United States.
Both the threat and the prophecy were made to a land of many gods. Hardship, poverty, disease, and war had never eroded the faith of the South Vietnamese, their faith in something much higher and larger than themselves. That faith's name to some was Buddha. His name to some was Jesus. His name to some was Confucius and Lao Tzu and Brahma and a myriad of names of ancestors. But in the strange and sometimes strained combinations of gods and faiths in this land, there emerged a commonality. There was a belief that this earth was not all. There was a cause and a reason for being, a cause larger than simply sustaining life. And this force was so powerful, so true, so real, that it was the reason for life itself. The stuff of South Vietnam was neither rice nor jungle, neither the delta nor the mountains. Its heart flowed with undefined faith, and from the undefined came its strength. Too easily, a stranger would say, he's a Buddhist, or he's a Catholic, or he's a Taoist. But the religions were countless and overlapping. The oldest form of Christianity in Vietnam was Roman Catholicism. Since the partition of the Vietnams, hundreds of thousands more Catholics came to the South, where the practice of religion was still free. The country was as mixed as its gods and faiths. The urban lives of Saigon, Hue, Dalat, and Da Nang, Nha Trang, and Vung Tau were full of cluttered patterns. Students and merchants and lovers and shoppers met in the splendor of an Asian disorder. Most of the populace paid no heed to the clamor of the cities and the sounds of horns and hawkers. 90% lived in the uncluttered fields, where they found in the land an uncommon contentment and an orchestration of their life and religion, of their earth and sky, of their work and love. But in Vietnam, the serenity of life and earth and family and prayer had a new intruder. The intruder was not always visible, not always apparent. At times it was difficult to believe he was present in the country at all. But he was. His habits were irregular, his preceding route was unknown. His next steps were never told in advance, but the evidence that he was there was fast becoming a part of every horizon. The intruder changed the horizons of rural South Vietnam and the skylines of urban South Vietnam. As 2 million refugees escaped from the north, not only shrines grew in the south, but hospitals as well. For now there was more than the sick to heal. There were hundreds, then thousands of wounded.
Let's have another reciter, please.
Civilians told their stories of grenades and shells and rifle shots from men who came to the villages and massacred most of those who lived there. They talked of pillage and fire and atrocities by the Viet Cong and by men who came from the north. The ones who still lived wore deep scars. The memory of a single day would last through their lifetimes, in their minds and on their bodies. These are films of South Vietnam after the destruction of a village by the North Vietnamese. To those in command of North Vietnam and the Viet Cong, the pursuit was a united Vietnam under Hanoi with a communist government. To those in South Vietnam, the pursuit was to be left alone. But they were not left alone. The story was always the same. It became a daily way of life and a daily way of death. Village after village, city after city. Today, dozens killed in one area, hundreds in another, thousands in another. Often mass graves were located months after a massacre. The ones who were previously known only to be missing were found, identified, and buried. In North Vietnam, rallies of victory were held with regularity. Death and destruction in the villages of South Vietnam were hailed as a liberation. The South Vietnamese reacted with missions to search for and destroy the weapons used against them. In the early 1960s, reconnaissance flights began. From the air, the land looked lush and innocent. Signs of an enemy or weapons storage were non-existent. If this lush land held secrets, it was rarely apparent from those in the quick overflights. And so the missions were preserved on film for later study by trained and unhurried eyes. Each flight brought to Saigon a precious cargo of photographs. The evidence was unmistakable. South Vietnam was under threat from external forces, and if it was to stay alive and answer that threat, it would need support.
On the occasion of your New Year's celebration, my fellow Americans and I extend our very best wishes for the prosperity and well-being of the government and the people of Vietnam. In your struggle against aggressive forces of communism, the sacrifices that you have willingly made, the courage you have shown, the burdens you have endured, have been a source of inspiration to people all over the world. Let me assure you of our continued assistance in the development of your capabilities to maintain your freedom and to defeat those who wish to destroy that freedom.
And so the Americans came to Vietnam. Other countries came as well to help the South Vietnamese. Australia, New Zealand, the Republic of Korea, Malaysia, the Republic of China, Thailand, and the Philippines. Just beyond the village were the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese. The civilians of the village were evacuated before the battle that was sure to come. Discovered are the prisoners taken by the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong. The battle for today is over. The battle for tomorrow is yet to begin. In the night that separates the two, the enemy would resupply and regroup and replan to take the village once again. The day-by-day price of holding a village was not cheap. In the 1960s, 40,000 Americans were killed in Vietnam, and there were another 1,000 whose fate was not known. And the wives of the missing appealed to the representatives of North Vietnam.
We are very puzzled about why they won't tell us whether or not the men are alive or dead. It seems a very simple thing for them to do. They have told many wives to come back and demonstrate against the United States government. And they implied that we should join the Women's Strike for Peace and that this would be the most helpful thing that we could do to help our men.
Once we educate the general public, not only in this nation but worldwide, to the true facts that these men are in fact not being treated the way Hanoi would like to paint the picture, then I believe public pressure will be brought to bear upon Hanoi, and they will be shown up for the dishonesty and distruth that they are putting forth. We tell the world, we have not heard, we do not know. Please just let us know if our husbands or sons are alive. This is so little to ask.
I've gone to see Senator McGovern since he has been to Paris and has talked with the North Vietnamese. I have written to Secretary General U Thant at the UN, and I have written to Xuan Thuy several times, have not received a reply.
In one of my most recent letters to Senator Fulbright, I said, last summer I wrote to you asking for an appointment with you and expressing the idea that the most vociferous critics of the war had very probably lengthened the war and thus had a detrimental effect on the possibility of release for the prisoners. At that time, you refused to see me on the grounds that my idea was so preposterous, and that was his phrase, that visiting with me would serve no purpose.
We're going back today to Paris in hopes of finding the information that we originally went there seeking. On September 17th, the North Vietnamese promised to send us letters regarding our husband's status and well-being. We have not to date received those letters. We still want to know about our husbands. We want to know what we can tell our children concerning their fathers.
Well, yes. At the beginning, the real rough treatment came at first when they were trying to get military answers from you, and then after that, they tried to force you into appearing before these delegations to say that you had received humane treatment, and they would throw rocks at you and hit you. And one of the little ones came up and hit me in the side of the mouth, and it dislodged a filling. But and then once I got to the camp, they refused to give me medical treatment, saying that I was going to die in 4 hours if I didn't give them information. I just finally passed out. The North Vietnamese tried to get Lieutenant Commander Stratton to appear before a press delegation and say that he had received humane and lenient treatment. He refused because his treatment hadn't been humane. He had been tied up to ropes, with ropes to such a degree that he still has large scars on his arms from the rope burns which became infected. He was deprived of sleep, beaten, had his fingernails removed, and put in solitary, but the North Vietnamese insisted that he make the false humane treatment statements and threw him into a dark cell alone to think about it for 38 days. I feel a strong obligation to the men back there. They know that I'm going to come back here and tell the truth, and that's what they wanted.
A great free debate, perhaps the greatest of all time, surfaced in the United States, and the country gave birth to 100 voices in universities, in town halls, on television, and in Washington.
I'm opposed to this war not only because I think it is morally and legally wrong, but because I think it is destroying the good name and the leadership of the United States. Furthermore, I believe that the war is militarily unwinnable. If we should succeed in bombing Vietnam to rubble, we will only find ourselves up against the Chinese.
Look, what I could do with is more compassion and more sympathy with those tens of thousands of civilians in South Vietnam who have been killed and kidnapped by the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces as a matter of deliberate policy. And the far larger tens of thousands of South Vietnamese military who've been killed and wounded simply because North Vietnam is trying to seize South Vietnam by force.
I lost a really dear friend over there, and all of a sudden it brought it home to me. And I began wondering, you know, what are we doing over there? Is this what honor is all about? Is it worth it? And I don't think it is.
All of us tend to place a greater value on our own people. But can you really draw a line as to whether it's worth one American life if that, by saving that American life, you subject probably thousands of Vietnamese to death? Human life is human life.
We believe that this war is illegal from every point of view, completely immoral, and I would like to add for myself that it's detrimental to the best interests of the United States.
How do you feel about all the charges that America's immoral and wrong in this war?
I feel they're false because I fought over myself, and I've seen it. Most of the people making these statements haven't been overseas in Vietnam. And if they could go over there and see what's going on, I think they'd think it was just war.
And we just cannot now dishonor our word or abandon our commitment or leave those who believed us and who trusted us to the terror and repression and murder that would follow.
I don't think there's any evidence, any real reason to believe that that kind of mass execution would take place.
The very fact that practically 2 million of the North Vietnamese fled to South Vietnam to escape the communist regime is an indication of that this government did not represent the will of the people.
Not only are we bleeding our men, having them die in Vietnam, we are spending at the rate of about $30 billion a year, $2.5 billion a month in Vietnam. Now that's more than we spend on our entire housing program. It's more than we spend on our entire poverty program in a year. And this money must be diverted back to our domestic needs, and we must end this futile war, immoral war.
The Vietnamese have resisted the invasion of any and all outsiders, the French, the Japanese, and now the Americans. And let me say, as one whose opposition to our policy in Southeast Asia long preceded the rising tide of revolt against it, that there can be no peace by negotiation.
The NLF is part, of course, of South Vietnam, a part that is like an alien body, fed, supplied, supported, and kept up in some state of vigor by a hostile force outside the country, namely in North Vietnam. I wonder how we in this country, or somebody in any other Western European country, would feel if such a force existed within their ranks and somebody from the outside would tell us now, be a good boy and let those people determine your fate.
It started out as a colonial war, it became a civil war, and we intervened on one side, a thing which this country has never done before, and I hope never does again.
Do you feel that what you've gone through and what you're going to have to go through the rest of your life was
I think just about all people should think of just one thing right now, and that's freedom. And the only way we're going to get freedom is to protect ourselves, whether it's in this country or in other countries that need our help. And I think a lot of people feel the same way as I do.
Well, I've said that we ought to publicly indicate our willingness to accept a new government in South Vietnam, which would be a coalition government or a fusion government. I don't really care what they call it. You'd have to anticipate that it would include elements of the National Liberation Front, because this is really what the war has been fought about.
The purpose of communists is to have a coalition government, and from that to dominate the South Vietnam under the communist regime. And our people in South Vietnam don't like it to have a communist.
Well, to those who are flirting with communism, I can only say, have you ever lived under a totalitarian government? Well, I have lived under two types, National Socialistic as well as communism. And I know what I'm talking about. Why don't you ask a Hungarian or a Czech or a Pole or anybody else how they like it before you really ignore the facts of life and support something that you wouldn't want for yourself or for your children?
If we cease bombing, we are, in a sense, not knuckling under, but calling the bluff of other governments who have said that this is the key, and confront them with the responsibility of following through with the imperative logic of their pronouncements in this respect.
Well,
it's a risk for peace.
That might be one element, but I don't hear very many people talk about stopping the invasion of South Vietnam by the North Vietnamese. It seems to me that the two go hand in hand.
There had been 4 or 5 bombing halts. The Soviets had asked us once to halt the bombing for 2 weeks. The suggestion being, the thought being, that they thought negotiations could begin within that period. And the bombing halt lasted for 37 days and was presumed when nothing had started.
I have now ordered that all air, naval, and artillery bombardment of North Vietnam cease as of 8 a.m. Washington time, Friday morning.
This is the kind of peripheral struggle that I think should be compromised. And I don't mean by that we run out and run it. I don't advocate we just say forget it at all. But it isn't of the kind of importance that surely would cause great nations to go to an all-out war.
If you're going to fight a war, I believe in winning it because you're losing lives. And this is one thing ought to be #1 priority. And whenever you get into war, my own idea is get everything you can, fast as you can, use everything you can, and get it over with. And I preach this, I'm not saying anything new.
Until the president stands up and says, we're bringing all of the troops home as quickly as we can bring them home, we're bringing them home now, I think the anti-war sentiment in the country will continue to grow. We have to bring them home, and we have to bring them home immediately.
That ending the conflict is not so simple as just calling it off and coming home, because the price for that kind of peace could be 1,000 years of darkness for generations yet unborn.
You don't think there should be a demonstration against the war? Do you think it does any good? It might hurry up the withdrawal?
No, I don't think it will hurry up anything. It might delay it.
Oh, do you have any children?
Yes, I have 3 boys.
Any of them old enough to take part?
One will be 18 next month.
Last spring, Jerry Grossman, a Boston businessman, who was the president of Massachusetts Peace Action Council, suggested that it might be possible to begin to put together an effort across the country to take time away from regular activities and instead devote those days to working against the war.
A lot of Americans are against war, but a lot of them that are against it don't really know everything about it, and they half know about it, and they don't really try to understand. They don't know the Vietnamese people, and they don't know the situation between the South and the North.
That's their objective. It's not peace. They know they are not become stronger, but they believe in you. You become weaker and weaker.
Can you imagine a protester in Hanoi, how far he'd get if he wanted to protest North Vietnam sending troops into South Vietnam or into Laos or Cambodia? He'd end up in a jug.
Have the authorities taken any action against you because of burning your card in Central Park in New York?
None whatsoever.
How do you feel about those who say that you're delaying the war, continuing the war, that prolonging it with this kind of action?
We want the war to stop, and we feel the best way for the war to stop is for the United States to get out of Vietnam.
The moratorium probably militates against the possibility of getting a satisfactory negotiated settlement from Vietnam, from North Vietnam, because it encourages them not to negotiate.
End the war! End the war! End the war! End the war! End the war!
You stupid idiots, you know.
What's your name, sir?
Never mind my name. I'm from Hungary. I'm a freedom fighter. I fought the communists. The bastards. Those idiotic anti-communists. You stupid idiots. I would shoot you all. Like the Russians will shoot you if they come. And half of you have no jobs. You're hanging around the Tudor Street, you demonstrators. You should be out working or do something in the hospitals. It's a disgrace what you are doing here against your own country. I'm ashamed for America, and I'm not an American. I'm a Hungarian.
Who have died in this war.
The many people who died, people die since time immemorial. There's nothing new. People is dying for freedom. People has to die for their children, for their future, for a free America like you here now. You couldn't walk around in Peking because you're misled. Deep inside, I'm sure you're all very, very decent people. And you want the best for humanity. But humanity is finished in the communist countries. You should be not shot, that's too good for you. Do you know what it means having communists go to Hungary, to Czechoslovakia, go to East? Don't laugh so idiotically on the back. Don't run away now. You should listen to that. Stupid idiots. The people here is fighting for freedom. Every coolie here is a hero. Every coolie, every Vietnamese should get a medal, and every American who works so fights here is a hero. You will realize when it's too late.
The debate went on. The demonstrations went on. And every president of the United States during the 1960s had voiced his endorsement of the United States position.
Today, the communists reach ruthlessly for domination over Southeast Asia and are trying to break our will to foil the attempt.
The use which the communists make of democracy, and then when they seize power, the effectiveness with which they manage the police apparatus so that dissent cannot arise, and so that the people can no longer express their will, the liquidation by gunfire of the opposition or by forcing them out of the country to be refugees. This suggests the kind of problem which we're going to have in this decade. And in my judgment, it's an extremely difficult matter for the free nations to deal with. But I must say that it's a matter to which we must address all of our energy and all of our attention.
This nation will keep its commitments from South Vietnam to West Berlin.
Since I took office as president, no single question has occupied so much of my time and energy as the search for an end to the war in Vietnam. An end fair to the people of South Vietnam, fair to the people of North Vietnam, and fair to those others who would be affected by the outcome. Both in public and at the Paris talks, we've offered a number of proposals which would bring peace and provide self-determination. And we're ready to consider any other proposals that have the same objective. Many urge that if only we halted our bombing of the North, peace would follow. Nearly a year has passed since the bombing of the North was halted. 3 months have passed since we began the process of troop replacement, signaling both our own genuine desire for a settlement and the increased readiness of the South Vietnamese to manage their own defense. As I announced on Tuesday, by December 15th, our troop strength in Vietnam will have been reduced by a minimum of 60,000 men. On September 2nd, 1969, North Vietnam's chief negotiator in Paris said that if the United States committed itself to the principle of totally withdrawing its forces from South Vietnam, and if it withdrew a significant number of troops, Hanoi would take this into account. I repeat here today what I said in my speech of May 14, that we are prepared to withdraw all of our forces from South Vietnam. And the replacement of 60,000 troops is a significant step. The time has come for the other side to respond to these initiatives. The time has come for peace. We in the United States want to end this war, and we are ready to take every reasonable step to achieve that goal. But let there be no question on this one fundamental point. In good conscience, we cannot, in the long-term interests of peace, we will not, accept a settlement that would arbitrarily dictate the political future of South Vietnam and deny to the people of South Vietnam the basic right to determine their own future free of any outside interference.
But the demonstrations and parades continued with a yell of hell no, we won't go. In South Vietnam, there were other parades where cries of hell no, we won't go were non-existent. For without defense, their families and country would live no more. But still the cries went on. Into the closing nights of 1969, candlelight parades marched down Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington. The freshly lit torch became one symbol to one group in one land. And it became another symbol to another group in another land.
Anh em ơi, cùng đi ta them whistle, yonder below. Yonder farmer they warming, yonder farmer they...
The flames were still bright on December the 31st, 1969. Whether that fire would be a permanent light of freedom or would be extinguished was not to be known within the decade. The United States had given lives and treasure and prestige to buy time for the South Vietnamese to face alone what had to be faced. In the last year of the 60s, the troops of the United States were leaving behind trained and equipped South Vietnamese to defend their destiny. For the guns of the North within the South were not silent. Though the decade was done, the struggle of the South Vietnamese to be free was still unfinished.
The United States' involvement in the war in South Vietnam, as well as in Laos and Cambodia, was an attempt to stop communist aggression and keep Southeast Asia free. It was a commitment made by 4 United States presidents that grew from a small force of American advisory personnel to one of over 500,000 Army, Navy, Marine, and Air Force participants. In 1965, as the American military buildup accelerated, the Communist Viet Cong and North Vietnamese armies escalated the war in an attempt to cut South Vietnam in half. They increased their hit-and-run guerrilla tactics against Allied forces and Republic of South Vietnam installations, and adopted a tactic of stand up and fight with battalion-sized forces. But this tactic made the Communists more vulnerable to air power. The decision was made to intensify the use of aircraft in the Vietnam action. The rapid buildup brought additional Air Force personnel to Southeast Asia. The teamwork displayed by this group of combat crewmen and ground personnel, often while under enemy attack, was a significant phase in Air Force history. In January 1973, a ceasefire went into effect, and the return of U.S. prisoners of war began immediately. It was checkout time at the Hanoi Hilton, as the prisoner of war camp in Hanoi had become known to its inmates. American prisoners began their long trip home. However, bombing continued in Laos and Cambodia until August 1973, thus ending almost 12 years of Air Force involvement in Southeast Asia. In addition to its combat role, the Air Force participates in many non-combat activities that are historically important. Many of these came about because of the social, economic, and environmental changes to our society during the 60s. Military civic action, for example, includes projects useful to the local population in such fields as education, training, public works, agriculture, transportation, communications, health, sanitation, and others that contribute to economic and social development. One of the most serious obstacles to progress in developing nations is the lack of roads and transportation. The Air Force has airlifted equipment, necessary supplies, material, and food to remote areas. Timely medical attention was made available to stricken people deep in the jungle. Such civic action offers a way for military forces to identify with the nation's civilian needs. Local Air Force commanders are encouraged to become involved in community affairs as part of the Air Force Community Services program. Such action is not limited to war-torn nations. When disaster strikes anywhere in the world, it often signals immediate extension of Air Force human and physical resources. Food, clothing, water, medical supplies, and technical assistance are quickly airlifted to the stricken populace. All local Air Force units and personnel are authorized and encouraged to volunteer their services. Humanitarian assistance is an important part of the Air Force mission. Pollution is also a problem that concerns the Air Force. To reduce air pollution, current aircraft engines are being modified to reduce polluting emissions. Looking to the future, the new F-15 aircraft uses the first aircraft engines specifically designed as non-smokers. Ecology has long been a part of Air Force operations. Generally, Air Force installations have land which must be maintained as a safety buffer, but which is not needed for facilities. This land has been used as sanctuaries and preserves for fish and wildlife resources since 1958. Discrimination of any kind is counter to Air Force policy, and concentrated effort is expended to dispel prejudice and mistrust wherever it may exist. At all command levels, formal training through education programs is mandatory. The goal is to eliminate discrimination in all its manifestations. Solving problems together is imperative in a highly technical Air Force. As a result, a premium is placed on education. Consequently, the Air Force is a primary producer of highly skilled specialists. Nearly 500,000 specialists annually take service or service-sponsored education courses, such as those of the Air Training Command or the Air Force Institute of Technology. Many participate in the Community College of the Air Force program, which gives them college credit for in-service education and training. Air Training Command Field training goes to the student. Others benefit from correspondence courses. A large number of airmen study at technical training centers. Many of the skills learned are directly applicable to civilian industry. National civilian productivity gains much from contributions of Air Force trained professionals and technicians. Conversely, the Air Force gains from the skills of civilian industry, for its defense products are the finest in the world. Excellent examples are today's advanced jet aircraft. The SR-71 reconnaissance aircraft provides the Air Force with an expanded global view. Its speed and range were demonstrated in September 1974, when it flew from New York to London, England, in 1 hour and 56 minutes. A distance of 3,490 miles at 30 miles a minute. The transatlantic flight shattered the existing speed record of 4 hours and 45 minutes, with a top speed which exceeded 3 times the speed of sound at 80,000 feet altitude. Its return flight from London to Los Angeles, California, took only 3 hours and 42 minutes. In July 1976, the SR-71 broke 6 speed and altitude records previously held by MiG-25 and U.S. Air Force YF-12A aircraft. The new records include speed over a 1,000-kilometer closed course and over a 15 to 25-kilometer straight course. It also set an altitude mark of 85,126 feet for sustained flight. More aviation history was made over a period of 17 days in January 1975. During Operation Streak Eagle, the F-15 Eagle broke every existing climbing record in aviation history. It completed the record sweep when from Grand Forks Air Force Base, North Dakota, it took off and climbed to 30,000 meters, approximately 103,000 feet altitude, in just 207.6 seconds. This performance exceeded the best previous 30,000-meter climb by 35.8 seconds. The mission, as part of the rugged F-15 flight test program, provided new data on high-altitude capabilities of the aircraft and its pilots. Also, it was a clear demonstration of American technology. The high-performance, highly maneuverable F-16 multi-purpose fighter is expected to outperform any known enemy threat in its class in the foreseeable future. The formidable B-1 bomber is much advanced over the aging B-52. It is capable of greater speed, heavier payload, and a better capability to penetrate enemy defenses. The A-10, designed to support frontline ground troops, can carry a heavy load, remain airborne for long periods, and take off and land on short runways. As for the future, the Air Force uses its previous X-15 space experience to move toward new frontiers. Working with the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, the Air Force investigated the possibilities of using X-24 research vehicles in the study of future hypersonic flight, which is above 3,500 miles per hour. Experience gained with the X-24 has contributed to development of the new space shuttle concept. Called the Enterprise, this orbiting vehicle will be used by the Air Force for Department of Defense space missions. After its flight in space, the Enterprise will re-enter the atmosphere and fly like an airplane to a designated landing area. The United States Air Force, on the threshold of the future, provides the American people with a capable and flexible air arm dedicated to the preservation of world peace.